a substantial difference in terms of their capacity to purchase our assets. And the second thing I just want to point out is that the subprime lending mess, part of the reason it happened was because we had an administration that does not believe in any kind of oversight. And we had the mortgage industry spending $185 million on lobbying to prevent provisions such as the ones that I proposed over a year ago that would say, you know, you've got to disclose properly what kinds of loans you're giving to people on mortgages. You've got to disclose if you've got a teaser rate and suddenly their mortgage payments are going to jack up and they can't pay for them. And one of the things that I intend to do as President of the United States is restore a sense of accountability and regulatory oversight over the financial markets. We have the best financial markets in the world, but only if they are transparent and accountable and people trust them, and increasingly we have not had those structures in place.
Time's up, Senator.
Senator Edwards, poor folk, middle-class folks really feeling the pinch. Yeah. Bankruptcies are up 40% in 1 year. 5% of credit card debts are now delinquent. In 2001, you voted for a bankruptcy bill, which was the precursor to the 2005 bankruptcy bill that became law, which made it much tougher for middle-class folks, particularly women, when they became bankrupt. Do you regret that vote?
I absolutely do. I should not have voted for that bankruptcy law. If you look at what's happening in America today, the bankruptcies that are occurring, about half of them are the result of medical costs. And the idea that any single mom who has a child who gets catastrophically sick and incurs $30,000 of medical costs has to go into bankruptcy as a result and can't be relieved of that debt makes absolutely no sense, and it's not fair and it's not right. And I spoke for just a few minutes ago about the great struggles that the middle class are faced with in this country, and you hear it every single day, because what's happening in America is jobs are leaving, cost of everything is going up. Health care, college tuition, everything. And on top of that, middle class incomes are not going up. The incomes at the very top are going up. Profits of big corporations are going up. But the incomes of middle class families are not going up. So the question is, what do we do about it? Besides having somebody who truly understands in a personal way what's happening, what would the President of the United States do? There are a bunch of things we need to do. We desperately need truly universal health care that covers every single American and dramatically reduces health care costs. We do need, as Brock spoke about just a few minutes ago, a radical transformation of the way we produce and use energy. We can create at least 1 million new jobs in that transition. We need a national law cracking down on predatory and payday lenders that are taking advantage of our most vulnerable families. We ought to raise the national minimum wage, which is going up to $7.25 an hour. That's fine. It's not enough. The national minimum wage should be at least $9.50 an hour. It ought to be indexed to go up on its own. We need to make it easier for kids to go to college. My proposal is that we say to any young person in America who's willing to work when they're in college, at least 10 hours a week, we'll pay for their tuition and books at a state university or community college. And that can be paid for by getting rid of big banks as the intermediary in student loans. They make $4 or $5 billion a year. That money ought to be going to sending kids to college.
Senator Clinton, you voted for the same 2001 bankruptcy bill that Senator Edwards just said he was wrong about. After you did that, the Consumer Federation of America said that your reversal on that bill, voting for it, was the death knell for the opponents of the bill. Do you regret that vote?
Sure, I do. And it never became law, as you know. It got tied up. It was a bill that had some things I agreed with and other things I didn't agree with, and I was happy that it never became law. And I opposed the 2005 bill as well. But let's talk about where we are now with bankruptcy. We need urgently to have bankruptcy reform in order to get the kind of options available for homeowners. In addition to what I want to do, which is the moratorium on foreclosures for 90 days to see what we can do to work them out, and freezing interest rates for 5 years, and making the mortgage industry more transparent so we actually know what they're doing. I mean, look what happened with Countrywide. You know, Countrywide gets bought, and the CEO, who was one of the architects of this whole subprime mess, is sent off with $110 million. $110 million in severance pay. You know, the priorities and the values are absolutely wrong. So what we've got to do is move urgently. In addition to what I've proposed, I think we've got to reform the bankruptcy law right now, going forward, so that people who are caught in these subprime and now increasingly conventional loans that they can't pay because of the way the interest rates are going up and many of the fraudulent and predatory practices that got people into them in the first place will have the option of getting relieved of this debt. So there's a lot we need to do right now. And, you know, I want to just add that the groups that sponsored this are primarily black and brown groups that care deeply about these issues. Everything we're talking about falls disproportionately on African Americans, on Hispanics, on a lot of Asian Americans. Here in Nevada, the African American and Hispanic communities are really the ones that are most victimized by these subprime mortgages. They're the ones who are often the first to be let go when the economy begins to slide. You know, in and out of the homes that I have visited in here in Las Vegas, those are the stories that I'm hearing. So we need to move urgently. We have a lot of big agenda items that I agree with John on, universal health care, college affordability, but we can't wait. We're going to lose another, million Americans in home foreclosures. We're going to see a deteriorating community across America because homes will be left vacant. The housing market is down. Nobody will buy those homes. Housing wealth, which is the principal source of American middle-class wealth, is now decreasing. So I have a real sense of urgency. We need to be acting now, and I know that the Democratic Congress under Senator Harry Reid and Speaker Pelosi are going to do everything they can to address this.
Senator Obama, the 2001 bankruptcy bill, the 2005 bankruptcy bill.
I opposed them both. I think they were bad ideas because they were pushed by the credit card companies, they were pushed by the mortgage companies, and they put the interests of those banks and financial institutions ahead of the interests of the American people. And this is typical. Now, Hillary's exactly right that we've got to modify some of the fraudulent practices, predatory lending practices. I put in a bill a year and a half ago to make that happen, because it does affect communities, including my own on the south side of Chicago. But unless we are able to rid the influence of special interest lobbies in Washington, we're going to continue to see bad legislation like that. And that's why we're going to have to change how politics is done in Washington. Now, we have an immediate problem. I met with a number of folks up in Reno just 2 days ago who are already seeing their homes being foreclosed upon. One of the things that we have to do is we have to release people who are in bankruptcy as a consequence of health care. We've got to give them a break. One woman who I was with, her husband is a police officer. He contracted cancer, went through chemotherapy, ends up being hit by a car while in the line of duty, and they fall 3-4 months behind on their health care payments, and that's it. They can't make the payments on their house. We've got to provide them some relief. I've put forward a $10 billion housing fund that can help bridge people who have been responsible in making their payments. They're not speculators. They're not trying to flip properties. They're in their own homes. We've got to make sure that they can get the kinds of help that they need to stay in their homes and make the payments and live out the American dream that is so important to so many people.
Time is up, Senator. We're going to get some more email questions from Natalie Morales.
All right, and this one is directed to Senator Obama. It comes from a resident of Miami, Florida. As a middle-class retiree whose primary source of income is dividends, capital gains from stock investments, what, if any, safeguards would you put in place to protect us from your proposed reversal of the Bush tax cuts on these investment vehicles?
Well, what I would do is I would exempt middle-income folks potentially from increases in capital gains and dividends. But what I have insisted upon is that we make our tax code fairer, and if, for example, my friend and Hillary's friend, Warren Buffett, makes $46 million last year, and he is paying a lower rate on a lower tax rate than his secretary, there is something fundamentally unjust about that. Yeah, and I think he acknowledges it. And he, by the way, he has offered $1 million to any CEO of a Fortune 500 company who can prove that they pay a higher tax rate than their secretary. Now, nobody's taken him up on the offer, by the way. So part of the reason is because he primarily gets his income from dividends and capital gains, and he's taxed at a lower rate. That has to change, and that's part of a broader shift that I'm proposing in our tax rates. We were talking earlier about low and middle income people really getting squeezed. I've said we need to provide tax relief to them. If you're making less than $75,000 a year, we are proposing that we offset the payroll tax to give you relief, $1,000 for the average family.